Live on tape, Work in Progress, a World at Work podcast about work, life, and everything in between. With award-winning radio host Tom Alexander and WorkSpan's Not Safe for Work columnist Charles Epstein. Here are your hosts, Tom and Charles.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Work in Progress. My name is Tom Alexander, along with Charles Epstein.
Hey, Tom.
Hey, Charles, you sound particularly upbeat today. Everything okay?
I sound upbeat, really? That's totally not me.
Well, yeah, usually when you're overly enthusiastic, I get nervous. I can, no, seriously, I can set my clock by your reliable, even-temperedness.
Why, thank you. I think. Well, I do try taking a never get too high or too low attitude into these podcasts.
Yeah, that's good thinking. It's a long season.
Well, it kind of reminds me, years ago, I started dipping my toe in Facebook and would always come across an old high school friend, Pete, who'd post all these backstage photos with the guys from Steely Dan, Prince, etc. He was a concert promoter. So I messaged to tell him that he's the reason I have to leave Facebook ASAP. The excitement gap between our lives is just too great.
It's a shame when people don't let you live your life vicariously through them. Would it have killed Pete to let you fantasize about being in his shoes and spending some quality time with Donald Fagen and Walter Becker?
I know. I might have to go back on Facebook and let him have it. But back to your comment about my uncharacteristic show of enthusiasm.
No. It's just fine. It's fine. I just know you pretty well. And I thought maybe you're, coming down with something.
Not that I know of, but thanks for putting ideas in my head. Now you got me worried.
Ladies and gentlemen, full disclosure. My podcast partner is a self-admitted hypochondriac. So
wait a second. Look, the great William Burroughs once said that paranoia is having all the facts. So just because you're a hypochondriac doesn't mean that something's not wrong.
Fair enough, but just don't go on WebMD to self-diagnose. That's absolutely the worst thing you can do.
Oh, totally. That's not a place you want to wind up if you're a quote-unquote hypochondriac.
Yeah.
I'm not conceding that, by the way.
I've made the mistake more than once of looking into a bump or a persistent ache only to convince myself that it's time to get my papers in order. So that can, take you to some very dark places.
Oh, man. Tell me about it. I know. I just as soon trust my diagnosis to, what was it, SNL guy, Theodoric of York, the medieval barber from the classic bit. I'd rather trust that guy over WebMD.
Yeah, the web is great for lots of do-it-yourself things, like getting spaghetti stains out of a white cotton shirt or throwing a split-fingered fastball. But when it comes to your health, best leave it up to someone who's had to dissect a cadaver or two.
Agreed.
All right. Well, with that said, let's let the folks in on what we've got in store for them on this show. Joining us, it is Amy Cappellanti-Wolf. Amy is the Chief HR Officer at Symantec and also CBS Sunday Morning producer, Jay Kernis. That's all ahead on this episode of Work in Progress. Back in a moment.
You're listening to Work in Progress with Tom Alexander and Charles Epstein.
As the demand for ever more talent increases, the issues of equity become top-level concerns for organizations. Comp teams are creating new playbooks to meet the challenge. For a growing number of organizations, those playbooks include job-based ranges that historically have been too burdensome to implement and maintain. Learn the trends driving adoption and how you can leverage them to attract and retain critical talent in PayScale's latest research. Visit us at payscale.com. That's payscale.com.
Amy Cappellanti-Wolf is Senior Vice President of HR for Symantec, the world's largest cyber security software company based in Mountain View, California. Amy specializes in helping businesses survive and thrive while undergoing deep transformation. Just for the record, Amy is our second guest who joins us from sunny Mountain View, California, the nerve center of Silicon Valley. Amy, welcome, and please say hello to my partner, Charles.
Hi, thanks for having me, and hi, Charles. I'm glad to be here.
Oh, we're delighted. Thanks so much, Amy, for making the time. I see in your bio that you are an quote unquote accelerated free fall certified skydiver. So, Tom and I were talking earlier about our fear of heights, actually. So, Tom, let me just ask you a question. What would it take to get you to throw yourself out of a plane? I'm curious.
Well, it's first of all, I want to clarify. It's not necessarily fear of heights, but a fear of falling. But though my career's been in a little bit of a free fall since 1999, but that's either here nor there. Maybe just a nice meal prepared by Wolfgang Puck if I actually make it, if the parachute actually opens as it's supposed to. Anyway, with that kind of risk taking, I guess you could say, how would you say that mindset informs your work at Symantec, or does it?
It does, absolutely. It's actually been a guide of my whole career in human resources and how I live my life. So I've always been the person that raises their hand for the tough assignments, or the ones that may not look glamorous, but ones that might actually help me to get better, smarter, faster. It has a little bit of risk to it. And I'd say at Symantec, we've had no lack of really interesting challenges to go after, whether it's large divestitures of parts of our company, big, hairy acquisitions, leadership transitions, spinning up a business, all different types of challenges that really I step into and lean into because I'm relatively fearless.
Yeah, you talk about that risk-taking. I actually was reading a blog post on the Symantec site preparing for this. I see how, under your leadership, the HR organization has embraced a data-driven approach, in the business. So, I'm curious, how does this approach affect or improve things like, greater diversity in hiring? And how does it help the company through periods of the change that you're talking about, such as when you're going through a major acquisition or even a divestiture?
That's a great question. And I think when there's times of uncertainty or there's big time pressure to get something quickly released or completed, people tend to sometimes rely on emotion and anecdotal inputs and feedback about things they're experiencing versus what does the data really tell you. And obviously context is super important in this, and I don't do data without context. But I also believe sometimes the data will help deflate some of the emotion and allow you to get to what the real problem is you're trying to solve for. So we use data in everything we do, whether it's listening to our employees about how they're feeling around leadership, the business, engagement. We use it to how we think about retention of our employees, and we use it to how we think about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And it's specifically important there because I believe you have to do the math. You have to understand what's in your addressable market and where you do business and where you have locations so you can understand what talent's available there, and then how do you open up the pipeline to get more diverse talent into those types of locations or jobs.
Amy, a new report from Cybersecurity Ventures estimates that there'll be 3.5 million unfilled cybersecurity jobs by 2021, up from 1 million openings last year. Some have referred to this as a cybersecurity labor crisis. Symantec's the world's largest cybersecurity company. What do you see the impact having on the workforce and your ability to recruit?
Well, it's a question of not just buying that talent, but building that talent. So our work is to continue to curate the capable talent that resides in this particular industry. And because we're the largest cybersecurity company, I think we're one leg up because we do really interesting work. And our mission is around really fighting the bad guys who are out to try and steal our data. So we draw people in who have that mission, which gives us an advantage. However, we're also competing with other folks in that lane. So what we also are doing is trying to build that capability from within, either through looking at development programs internally around building cybersecurity capabilities, and also going out to campus where we've got early in career folks who may have the educational background, but not have curated the experiential capabilities. And so we bring them in and put them onto a fast track to help get them the skills that will help us build our workforce and our pipeline for future cybersecurity experts.
It seems to me that, you sort of have a dual challenge and they're sort of going in opposite directions. And I know while, managing change is something that you do, that's a focus of yours, on the one hand, I know that, Symantec has been a pretty dynamic company over the years. I know you made some key acquisitions and, you sold off the Veritas data storage business. So there's, on the one hand, flux, or better way to put it is just evolution, change, and so forth. Yet, you also want to create a culture amidst all that change where, you can attract and retain the best talent, and not just, the people on the college track, but these other people who are not on their track as you're talking. So I wonder how you deal with that sort of dual, almost like a competing challenge where two dynamics are sort of going in opposite directions.
It's a great question. I would say, first of all, we've had a lot of acquisitions. So a lot of our work right now is to get into one integrated culture, because we have to be one team. And we have both a consumer business and an enterprise business. And they have to be one Symantec to both our customers and to how we do work internally. So the first thing we're really focused on right now is integrating that culture so it aligns towards our most big and important rocks we have to go lift. Secondly, there's a lot of work around some of our principal and what I would say fellows who are deeply steeped in understanding cybersecurity and technology architecture, and leveraging them and their capabilities to mentor the next generation of talent. And it's a terrific way to leverage at this point, we have 4 different generations of talent working in the workplace at the same time, as opposed to thinking they might be in disagreement or threatened by each other. How do we bring them together so that the more experienced folks are bringing the earlier generations on board, and also the earlier generations or the new employees are also bringing in technology off of college campuses. So it's to me, it's a symbiotic relationship and something we're really striving to really build upon here at Symantec.
Amy, if you were giving someone advice who's looking to pursue a similar career in HR, what would you say are the 2 or 3 perhaps most important things to know, things that have contributed to your success in HR and beyond?
Yes, thank you for that. Well, first of all, to be really good in HR, you have to understand the business. You have to understand how a firm makes money, who its customers are, who it competes with, what are both macroeconomic and microeconomic things that may actually impact the performance of the business. So if you don't understand the business, then you're not able to really tie the business strategy to an HR strategy, and therefore really represent what is right for the people agenda. So first, understand the business. 2, to be really good in HR, you really have to be good at creating sort of a plan by which you're going to execute. It's not like you can just flip something over and expect people to adopt it. You have to understand your stakeholders, what's critical for them, and what they can digest in terms of programs or practices that in HR we roll out to the business to help them be better in what they do every day. So very strong project management skills and strong stakeholder skills. And the last thing is data. Really, to understand people, you have to understand the composition of your workforce, the availability of talent into the company. You have to understand how people want to be treated. So you have to have a good sense of engagement through data, through surveying, through focus groups. So using lots of different types of inputs.
For years, you'd read stories about what does HR need to do to have a voice in the executive suite. And that's obviously a core component of what it is you do and have done. In a previous interview, we interviewed Ron Selawatch, CEO of HRMC, and who in his spare time races speedboats. Now, we mentioned to Ron that, we all know that HR and thrill seeking don't automatically go hand in glove. But now I'm not necessarily describing you as a thrill seeker, Amy, but it leads me to ask, what is it about your job that gets you excited? When you get up in the morning and jumping out of a plane is not on that day's to-do list.
Sometimes it feels that way, but not really. Well, I think first I'd say is to be in HR, you have to be egoless, meaning, there's a lot of things you do behind the scenes. There's a lot of things you do to prop up leaders, and you're not always in front and center. In fact, sometimes you don't want to be front and center. You want to make the business self-healing and give them the tools they need to be successful every day. So I'd say the first thing is checking your ego at the door and being open to influencing, doing, strategizing, doing tactics at all levels because you have to play the game where you're at and where that business is ready for you. So I'd say that's the first thing. And then secondly, you got to be like open to taking some smart risks and learning. I'm all about failing fast. We'll try new things, we'll learn from them, and then we'll iterate for the next generation. And sometimes that requires some risk. Hopefully it's educated risk, but I don't think if you're not uncomfortable, you're probably not pushing yourself and you're not pushing the business. And as my husband would tell my two young daughters, is when you ski and you fall, that's a good thing because you're not pushing yourself hard enough if you're not falling. So that's how I think about the work I do in HR every day.
My last question is, do colleagues around the office know about these skydiving exploits? And I also see you're a marathon runner, so this, this kind of sends a good message to the workforce. No one will outlast you, and you're the last person in the office anybody's going to want to play chicken with. So I think that's pretty good stuff.
Well, now I've got a new way to market my background, so thank you for that.
Well, that's a tale for another day, perhaps. But we've really enjoyed your time today, Amy. It's Amy Cappellanti-Wolf, Senior Vice President of HR for Symantec, the world's largest cybersecurity software company, and they're based in Mountain View, California. Amy, I can tell you this: if I get out, the next time I get out to Mountain View, I think I'll stay firmly on the ground and watch you dive. And I can give a play-by-play of all the action, but I don't think you'll get me up in the play.
Oh, you never know. I'm pretty good at influencing, but happy to have you and come visit sometime soon.
Well, that would be wonderful. Amy, thanks again for your time. Continued success with everything you do.
Thank you.
Work in Progress will return after these words.
Employee sleep impacts company health. Poor sleep directly impacts absenteeism, performance, safety, and healthcare costs. It worsens other chronic diseases such as diabetes, stroke, and heart disease. The Drowsel Sleep Health Program educates, motivates, and measures progress towards better sleep health. Learn more about how we can help to improve your employees' sleep health today. Visit resonea.com. That's RESONEA.com.
If you've watched network television news programs for more than the past decade, you've undoubtedly seen our next guest's work. Jay Kernis is a producer on CBS Sunday Morning with Jane Pauley. He's also produced award-winning features for NBC, CNN, and NPR. Jay Kernis, welcome.
Thank you so much.
It's great to have you, and I'm sure you're always in a whirlwind of activity there at CBS Sunday Morning. And I'd like to introduce you to my partner, Charles Epstein.
Charles, good to meet you.
Yes, same. Thanks so much for making some time for us.
Sure thing.
I'm sure like a lot of people, when I think of CBS Sunday Morning, I think of course, Charles Kuralt. And man, I really used to love his On the Road segments. I always thought it would be great to revive the idea and kind of modernize it.
Well, Steve Hartman actually does his own version of On the Road. He does it for the CBS Evening News and also for us. So he actually goes across America and finds all of these people who do remarkable things, and we know the audience feels the same way we do, but as producers, we sort of have a dare with each other because he finds these people who do these wonderfully heartbreaking, wonderful things for each other, and we say to each other, okay, we're not going to cry this time. But more than not, the Steve Hartman piece makes you weep. And it's actually one of the most popular features on Sunday Morning. But he finds, kids who help veterans and people who stand in front of their yards and say hello to people for 20 years and people who sacrifice their lives for others and sort of dare yourself not to weep. By gosh, every week. My wife was always turning to me and saying, oh, come on, he's not going to get you again. It's like, yep. I must tell you, viewers, we only have 6 million viewers now. More than not, the one comment we always get, and I know this may disappoint some people to hear, but a lot of people say, well, I don't go to church anymore. I watch Sunday Morning. Now, we know in the United States that church attendance is down, but the audience tells us over and over again that in some way, this news magazine fulfills some spiritual part of their lives, which, as a news person, it's quite a responsibility to have and think about, that we are in people's homes on Sunday mornings, and they are not only using us to get news and to get a better understanding of the world, but also we have this somehow spiritual component to fill.
Jay, you've been with Sunday Morning for 5 years. Just recently, we had actor Phil Morris on. He played Jackie Childs in season 7 of Seinfeld, and we were curious how he navigated a very established culture. Your show, of course, CBS Sunday Morning, a long-time institution, 40 years.
40 years old, yeah.
Yeah, 40 years. How are things when you had to make that adjustment, when you joined them several years back? How was that? How was transitioning into that culture?
It was actually very natural. This is my second time at CBS. So my first time I began in 1987. I was on the original CBS This Morning. Then I did the first day to the last day of Eye to Eye with Connie Chung, which was a primetime show. Mm-hmm. I spent a year with the CBS Smithsonian unit, which celebrated the 150th anniversary of the Smithsonian. And then I did 5 years with 60 Minutes, 4 years with Leslie Stahl, and a year with Mike Wallace. And then I went back to NPR. I had been before that at NPR for 14 years. I'm actually the founding producer of Morning Edition. That was back in November of 1979. Five years later, Scott Simon and I created Weekend Edition. And I think a year after that, around 1985-86, Susan Stamberg and I created Weekend Edition Sunday. I tell you all of that because if there is any program that is close to what I did at NPR, it's CBS Sunday Morning. So for me, it's always been a natural fit. And for the executive producer who hired me, Rand Morrison, our executive producer, he thoroughly understood that I had all of that CBS experience, but I had the NPR storytelling experience. So, I've gone back and forth between radio and television. That makes a lot of sense to me, the two media. And because NPR started in 1971, I started there in 1973. And because I was really trained there for 14 years, and then trained, we're not allowed to say you were trained at 60 Minutes, but it is a remarkable place to work. I mean, people tell me all the time, you are in the perfect job, to such a degree that my boss, who knows the kind of pieces that I do and the kind of pieces I love doing, walks into my office and says a couple of words like comic books for grown-ups. And I know that's what he wants. He wants me to do a piece about that. That's all he says. So he frequently walks in and says a couple of words, and I go, "Oh, right, I would love to do that."
Jay, if I may, just want to get back to a comment you made originally about how many people are watching your show almost as a replacement for church going, or they're watching it for some sort of spiritual sustenance. It almost feels like a Back to the Future vibe when, back in the day, you had the three networks and it was a more unifying experience. Whereas now, of course, many of us talk about how tribal news has become. You go and watch the news that you want to watch. You get the information that plays to your biases and predispositions. And it seems to me that the audience you're drawing is pretty diverse.
It is a diverse audience. In that 6 million viewers, there's just enough. Hold on a second. I can actually go to my computer and get the language that we use. We are the number one Sunday morning news program. When a lot of shows aren't showing growth, we show growth from year to year.
You're talking about audience, Jay, and I would think that has some weight in dictating, selecting topics. And you sort of alluded to that a little earlier with conversations with your superiors there and saying, hey, they just throw out one phrase and then suddenly that's a story.
It's sort of messy and it's wonderful. So I should know this, but we have probably 16 or 18 producers. All of us get on average 25 to 40 pitches every day in our email from press people, attorneys, studios, book publishers. So there's 18 of us getting, let's say, 30 pitches every day. Each week, we may pitch, each of us, one of those ideas to our executive producer. He will reject 90% of them. So the bar is very high. We don't really pitch on paper. He walks around every day. You catch him, and you have about 12 seconds, maybe 15 seconds to pitch him. There's a Stradivarius violin. It was stolen and lost for 30 years. It's been found, and now an 18-year-old at Juilliard is playing it again after it spent a year in repair. And he goes, wow. So you have to get that wow from him. Sometimes he continues the conversation. Sometimes he says, find out more about it and go. We lobby incessantly as producers. The producers are getting all these ideas from people, and we have our own ideas. Well, we have a whole roster of wonderful correspondents. I don't want to leave anybody out, but Mo Rocca, Lee Cowan, Martha Teichner, Tracy Smith, Nancy Giles, et cetera, they are coming up with ideas. So at any given moment, there's hundreds and hundreds of ideas, all vying for that wow, all vying to get to the top and get to the green light. Look, I had a piece that I did a couple of years ago. It was based on a Broadway show that unfortunately didn't succeed called Shuffle Along. And I had done 2 pieces on the show, and we were going to do a third piece about blackface, the history of blackface, which is absolutely remarkable. For more than 100 years, it was the number one entertainment form in this country. It was basically began with white performers, but because of racism in this country, black performers had to get in blackface to stand on stage. The piece never aired. So I said to my executive producer, well, every year around Halloween, there are fraternities and sororities that unfortunately get in blackface, don't know they're doing something racist, that usually makes news. But it wasn't big enough to get the piece off the shelf. The piece was on the shelf for 2 years. Then Megyn Kelly, late of NBC, made the remark that it was acceptable when she was young to put around Halloween to go in blackface.
Which begs the question, how old exactly is she?
Well, I don't know, and I think it's kept secret. But she made the unfortunate remark that as long as it was in character, it was okay to be in blackface. That was the last straw for NBC. She was let go. I walked into my executive producer's office and I said, I think I need to mess up your show rundown this week. I have this blackface piece that's been on the shelf for 2 years. He said, well, I don't want to shame anybody. I said, no, it's not about that. It doesn't mention Megyn Kelly at all. It's just the history of blackface. He said, let's go in the edit room. We pulled the piece up and he goes, yep, we're going to change the show. And we put a new top on it. And at the end, he said, just put Megyn's picture, a headline from her, what happened that week was when she lost her job at NBC, put that as the last shot. That piece was on the shelf for 2 years. My editor knew it, I knew it, my correspondent knew it. We were just looking for the right moment. So you have all of these producers constantly looking for the right moment.
If Megyn Kelly did not make her remark, all you had to do was wait several months and the governor from Virginia would have helped you out.
You're absolutely right. And that's the faith you have to have in your pieces, that a good piece will eventually find a place on the show.
You mentioned the executive producer, and you have to get him to wow. Any wow moments that are going to make it on air in the next several months?
I can't talk about anybody else's pieces. It's very difficult to talk about what I'm working on because of the competition. I will tell you one piece that I'm working on that I'm pretty sure no other news show is going to do. My boss walked in a couple of weeks ago and said, at some point I want you and Mo Rocca to do a piece called Opera 101. What is happening with opera in this country? Now, it's not like an evening news show is going to do that piece, but the wow is that opera is more popular than it's ever been before, that opera is going on all over the country, and there's thousands and thousands of young people who are, at a very young age, learning operas because that's what they want to do when they grow up, when they get older.
That's really interesting. You know, a friend of mine who usually listens to things like The Clash and Ramones shocked me just a couple of weeks ago, telling me that he's cultivating an interest in opera.
There you go.
Jay, you've had Charles Kuralt, Charles Osgood, now Jane Pauley. And it seems like the transitions have been so seamless that the audience really takes into their arms these hosts. Can you talk a little bit about that?
This program's 40 years old. We've had three remarkable anchors. Charles Kuralt and Charles Osgood for many, many years, and now Jane Pauley. And she's great to work with. And here's why. She started in network television when she was 24 years old. She knows, she has said it to us, this is the best job I have ever had. She knows who she is. She's not looking over her shoulder thinking, oh, who is the younger woman who's coming after my job this time? She loves being here. We love working with her. I took her back to her home state of Indiana to do John Mellencamp. This is almost famous in our lore now because Mellencamp, I knew that he wanted to take her on his motorcycle. She said to me, well, just make sure I have a helmet. So I made sure there was a helmet there. And of course, at the moment they got on the motorcycle and cameras were rolling, she said, oh, I don't think I want the helmet. I said, you got to wear the helmet. She goes, no, I'll be fine. So I said to Mellencamp, just take her to the end of your driveway, which is like a mile long, and come back. Well, like 5 minutes later, I turned to Mellencamp's assistant and I said, where are they? I said, well, by this point, they're over the bridge. And they came back, they were going really fast. And in the final piece, Jane knew she had to say, I know I should have worn a helmet. But she's willing to go the distance to make great television. You know, all of us are very lucky that she's here.
Well, Jay, we really do appreciate your time, and we certainly appreciate your work. I, for one, can say I've seen many, many of your features that you've produced.
Oh, well, thank you.
They're just off to Korea for you, and we wish you safe travels.
By the way, at CBS, we producers fly coach, not business class.
Okay, good to know.
It's a long trip.
Jay Kernis, producer at CBS Sunday Morning, has been our guest, and we'll be back in a moment.
This is your once-a-year opportunity to help put your organization at the forefront of all things total rewards. It's not just the exceptional speakers, or the inspiring content, or the invaluable networking. It's 3 days, jam-packed with what's now and new in HR and what's on the horizon. Register today for the 2019 Total Rewards Conference and Exhibition, May 6th through the 8th in Orlando, Florida. Register today and see you in Orlando.
You're listening to Work in Progress.
And we're back on Work in Progress. Interesting show, Charles.
Oh, yeah, great interviews. I hope we didn't overdo it with the skydiving thing with Amy. Though I have to say, again, there's nothing you can do, no magic dollar figure that would get me to jump out of a plane, even if you told me I'd land on a field of plush, high-end pillow top mattresses. There's just nothing you can do to incentivize me to jump out of a plane. May be able to shame me, but not incentivize.
Yeah. Shaming tends to work sometimes, doesn't it? And the interview with Jay was interesting. I mean, what a career, 60 Minutes, NPR, now Sunday Morning. What struck me was how hard it is getting stories on the air. 12 seconds is all you get with the executive producer to wow him, right? And Jay makes it sound like a congenial environment working alongside all these talented producers, on-air personalities, and so forth. But it has to be tough seeing a colleague getting segments green lighted and you're not getting your share of wow moments, not to mention produce segments on the air, right?
Oh, I know. It's got to be frustrating. On the one hand, you're working for this venerable institution on Sunday morning. So, maybe you're just happy to be part of that. But on the other hand, if your colleagues are getting segments green lit and you're not, it's got to great. Too bad we didn't have time to probe that and find out what an absolute snake pit that place is, though, of course. We all do love Jane Pauley.
We do love Jane Pauley, absolutely, who's great with or without a motorcycle helmet. Yeah.
By the way, when I mentioned they should have found someone to succeed Charles Kuralt, I wasn't thinking of someone who worked the tear ducts. I was thinking someone more gonzo, maybe a cross between Hunter Thompson and Anthony Bourdain, traveling the country and causing all kinds of havoc.
Yeah, no, I hear that. Truth be told, if I wanted to weep, I don't need a Sunday morning show. All I have to do is take a peek at my latest bank statement, and then Charles, this has been fun, and we appreciate everyone listening to Work in Progress. For Charles Epstein, I'm Tom Alexander. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you next time. So long, everyone.
This has been Work in Progress, a World at Work podcast about work, life, and everything in between, with award-winning radio host Tom Alexander and WorkSpan's Not Safe for Work columnist Charles Epstein. For more, visit worldatwork.org/work-in-progress. That's worldatwork.org/work-in-progress. Join us next week for another edition of Work in Progress.